recently, formal and costly teleconferencing systems have been released by free or inexpensive web services. Okay, so let's pause. What is this about again? This is about the Olympics, international company across all kinds of different major cities in different time zones, different continents, and they were going to use teleconferencing in order to do their business together, right? And so we're investigating that, looking at the hardware that was required, getting frustrated at the fact that 2/3 of you forgot to mention software as an important part of the information technology, and so on, okay? But now we're up to the last bit, and this was at 4 marks, okay? And I don't think anyone got 4. I don't think, from memory. And here's why, okay? Let's unpack the question. Formal and costly teleconferencing systems. Now, I think people missed that. I think people missed that usually teleconferencing is this big, expensive thing. You have to get a whole system installed and proper training, and it's a formal system as opposed to kind of like an ad hoc. Hey, let me just send a hangout request to you or something like that. It's a big deal usually. Okay. Now, those have been sort of replaced in many ways by these really cheap web services. So all of these here, they're either cheap or free. Okay, either cheap or free. Now, that was the first misunderstanding. Here was the second one. Discuss, that was okay, but discuss this new trend with regard to, okay, new possibilities and risks. Okay, pause. Now, I think usually you see the word discuss and you automatically go down, okay, advantages, disadvantages, or benefits and, well, let's see, negatives and that kind of thing, okay? So what happened was people started to re-answer this question. They looked at this and they thought, okay, yeah, good stuff about teleconferencing and bad stuff about teleconferencing. And so you started answering question A again. And some of you, in fact, I think I caught like 2 or 3 of you who were taking your answer from A verbatim and putting them again in C, okay? Now that's just I don't know if you thought when you were going through reading time, you were like, sweet, you put in the same question twice, I can, one answer and get double the marks for it. That it should be a warning sort of sign to you that you've missed, they're totally different keywords. The situation that's being looked at is quite different, okay? So let's come back and see what we're actually being asked. Possibilities and risks for who? Commercial users. Now, what's a commercial user? What would be the opposite of a commercial user? You guys? Okay, so students. Why can't students be commercial users? Yeah.
We're not using it for any monetary gain.
Yeah, good. So commercial, right? It's to earn money, right? To earn revenue. So the opposite to a commercial user, we would tend to call a personal user. Okay, so like personal computers, right? So that was the first thing that you missed. Okay, so we sort of answered it in general terms and didn't talk about people who are trying to make money off this thing. Okay. Secondly, though, people often talked about the companies that are producing teleconferencing systems, right? So you talked about Skype and Apple and Facebook and Google versus all these companies who used to be making teleconferencing systems and so on, okay? So you might have said, oh, there's going to be heaps of competition in this space now that people are introducing a free product. And you didn't talk about the companies, the commercial users who are actually going to be using Skype, FaceTime, Facebook, and so on to actually do video calling, okay? So that's why so few people got full marks, because you might have given me a lot of valid information, but you just missed the question entirely, okay? So that's what you got to use reading time for, right? Okay, so now that you feel really guilty for not getting the question, let me show you how we should answer this, okay? So if you got your notes there, you can just head it, benefits, and risks. That would have worked. Okay, so I think this was 4 marks, so I was kind of looking for 2 and 2, right? Just generally speaking. But let me give you, I think I got 6 here, right? So number 1, and some of these are really obvious, but you didn't phrase it in the right way, or you, like I said, you missed the question. So here's one, an increase in remote and international work. That's a new, sorry, I didn't mean benefits, I meant opportunities. An increased opportunity to where it was impractical before because you needed to take flights or you just didn't have the time or the money to set up an office elsewhere. Now you can do international or remote work much more easily. Small companies, startups, ones without massive budgets can become international companies quite, well, relatively easily compared to days of the past where you need to have millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to actually be an international company. Okay, so the fact that you can cross physical and chronological boundaries opens up this possibility, this opportunity. Okay, does that make sense? You see, I'm trying to answer the question. It's about commercial users, so I'm thinking business in terms of not just woohoo, I can chat to my grandma across the other side of the world. That's useful and doesn't answer the question. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking about business. Yeah, commercial. Okay, another one. You can replace expensive setups, these formal and costly systems that I was talking about before, with really, really simple kinds of hardware. And when you were answering question B, all of the stuff there was very, very cheap. Like, you guys can afford it, right? So if you replace those kinds of expensive setups and also expensive contracts, so, you know, making international calls on, say, a telephone, it costs a lot of money, right? Like, they don't charge you, you don't just pick up the phone and you make a call and it's 20 cents or even $1, right? They charge you by the minute, right? So that's very, very costly. But, you know, you're not, people who are on a Google Plus Hangout or on Skype, they're not like watching their seconds count down, okay? So you're replacing expensive setups and expensive ongoing costs with a really, really cheap system. And again, not using the word cheap as in like, you know, kind of a bit dodgy, right? But cheap for a business, that's really, really good, right? It opens up a whole bunch of opportunities. Okay. Number 3. Now, this was kind of a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Alluded to in part A, okay? But the ability to call emergency meetings, that's important for a company and really, really useful. Okay? The ability to not have to schedule a meeting, but something's gone wrong, our server's gone down in this country, or there's a disaster, or something we have to respond to, and it's time critical, okay? Teleconferencing allows you to call these kinds of things for international offices. That's really cool. That's a business thing. In days past, even if you were an international company, right, you would have had your meetings scheduled before. We talked about this in part A, okay? So if there was some kind of disaster, some kind of emergency that required a quick response, you just had to wait to the next business day to actually take any action on it. Or maybe later in the week even, because you had to fly over there and so on, okay? I've even got I've got a cousin, my dad's oldest sister's son, and my dad's actually the youngest in his family. So he's like, this cousin of mine, he's like 25 years older than me. So there's a big gap, right? But he's part of an international importing company. So they import foods and that kind of thing, and they keep it frozen and so on. But they don't do this kind of thing, right? They have to travel back and forth between Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, all of these Southeast Asian countries, because that's where all the importing is happening, okay? So when they need to have a meeting, it's not going to be an emergency meeting. They just don't do that kind of thing, okay? Because they don't have these kinds of systems in place. Okay, a fourth and last sort of, and this one was very sort of rare. I think maybe 1 or 2 people mentioned it. But one of the cool things about, say, you know, Google Plus Hangouts is the main place that this is happening, okay? But it's not just for the company to interact with itself, okay? Have you noticed companies or like politicians and that kind of thing doing Google Plus Hangouts as a way of engaging with the public, okay? So President Obama did a really big one. Was it this year? I think it was earlier this year. You can go look it up, okay? Because it's on YouTube now. They did the Hangout and they recorded it, and it's available for everyone. So what it allows for, or what it enables, is engagement with the public in a really substantive way. Okay? How would a company usually interact with its audience or with its clients? Okay? Generally in quite impersonal ways, like sending out letters to its customers, or putting an ad on TV, something like that. It's not customized at all. It's not two-way, really. It's quite simplex, isn't it? Right? So this is really, really cool. This is a big quantum leap up, and that's why so many people, like politicians and other big companies, are using it. Okay, so there are some new opportunities, right? Now, can you see how opportunities is very, very different? Here's our list to benefits, right? They do overlap, but these are like not just, oh, this is good, but this is, hey, look at all this cool new stuff which we never could do before, was impractical before, and now we have the opportunity to go and do it. Does that make sense? Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay. Let's have a look at some risks. Okay, now again, people were really exaggerating with their risks. Okay, so they said things like, "Oh no, the whole universe is going to find out all of our stuff that all of our what's the phrase I'm looking for? All of our data that we put online because it's all public and that kind of thing." Yeah, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Okay, but there are some privacy concerns. Okay, so let's have a look. I've got a couple. If you said lack of security, that was okay, as long as you didn't go over the top, okay? So what might be examples of lack of security? What could really happen? Any thoughts, practically speaking? Yeah, Sonny? Okay, yeah, good. So maybe not necessarily like totally listen in, but if you've got people who leave their accounts logged in, which by the way, in companies happens all the time, that's a real security risk. Okay, so for example, authorized accounts being misused. Okay, there's heaps of kinds of security practices which we all know about, like don't leave stuff logged in, change your passwords often, all that kind of thing, which is very obvious. They're kind of truisms, but people still don't do them because they're inconvenient. Okay, so you open yourself up to security risks there. You've also got the problem of, this is kind of related, okay, not just authorized accounts being misused, but authorized accounts. That's an S. It's a really bad S. Not just being like hijacked by someone else who just walks along and, oh, someone's left themselves logged in, which happens to people's Facebook accounts all the time. But authorized accounts being maliciously misused, right? Remember we distinguish between those? So this is the actual person who owns this account, but they're actually going to purposely use it for the wrong purpose, okay? So things like, I'm trying to think of, if you're an owner or an administrator in one of these companies, okay? You're an authorized user who has access to all this data that's passing through your company. It passes through Facebook or Skype or through Apple and so on. Passes through their servers, okay? So you have people who they have authorized accounts, okay? But they can misuse it and they can actually listen in. So that's very different to some random guy coming in and trying to hack someone's account, okay? This is someone on the inside, okay? From the video conferencing companies involved. Okay, so this is why it's a different risk. It's from different people. Okay, so this is what we really mean by these are dangers. If a company was going to say go with these companies and get rid of its big expensive teleconferencing system, these are the things that have to judge and say, is this worth like the operational feasibility benefits and the economic feasibility benefits, is it worth it for the risks that we incur? Okay, does that make sense? So just to summarize, again, I think the big thing that you missed was that most people weren't thinking business minded. They missed the point that it was about commercial users, okay, which is why you missed the question. Okay? Yeah.
Aren't you changing the nature of work as a risk? Because
Explain.
Can happen in the middle of the night, and like you're always more connected. Like
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. All right. I think that's a fair mention. So that's kind of like the flip side of this one. Sorry. Here, number 3. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily I don't think it's necessarily the best. I would have paid it, but I don't think it's the best answer because as a company, I'm not thinking I'm opening myself up to this because it's a tool that I'm going to use, right? So maybe an individual worker might be like, oh, I don't want to work here because they use this system, but yeah.